My name is Joyce, and I am a grateful recovering addict. I will be celebrating 15 years in November. Um, what kind of like my backstory? There's a lot of abuse and whatnot that I had went through as a young girl. Neglect, abandonment, different variations of childhood trauma. And I myself do not have a memory prior to the age of 7. Over the course of time in my recovery, different counselors and whatnot that I have worked with, they've wanted to go back and try to do a few variations of therapy that may be able to help unravel some of that. However, I've made the due diligent decision for myself to not go through that route, only because I know how the trauma that I do remember affected me. And I just would think that I'm better off not knowing. There's a reason my brain shut it out, and I feel like that's just where it needs to stay. Um, let's see. Through everything that I had gone through as a child, I had zero processing skills. I had zero coping skills. To the point that when friends or whatnot would come around and everything and wanted me to try something, it was when I was upset or whatnot, to try to get me to calm down, I would go ahead and I would roll with it. The first time that I tried drugs or alcohol really was around the age of 12. It was after an incident that had happened, which is part of my childhood trauma, at the public pool. And my stepsister had offered me, when she went to take me out one night, um, marijuana and a beer. And that there was really the beginning of I feel like my use of a substance to cover up what was really going on, how I really felt. And from there, it was still dealing with things at home with abuse and whatnot from one of my parentals. Still dealing with abandonment issues from another parental, bullying, rape, several different other types of events, to the point that I just couldn't cope a whole lot. And when my one of my parentals had called me a cuss word out in public, I then chose to just pack my things and I moved out. And I moved in with my grandmother. Once I was there with my grandmother, kind of a wild hair got up my back end, and I chose to not be truthful of where I was going. I was supposed to have been at work, and instead of being at work, I was with my boyfriend. And it was things that just, God rest her soul, she wasn't able to handle, and that was okay. But I was given a decision at that point. By then I was 17, a senior in high school, to either move out or get married. At 17, senior in high school, I chose to get married because that type of abuse that I went through at my mother's was not what I wanted or where I felt like I needed to be. Got married, like I said, at 17. Before the end of senior year, I was separated. Before I turned 18, I was pregnant with my first child and had became married for the second time. That marriage, there was a lot of cheating, there was a lot of abuse, there was a lot of abandonment. Again, because I'd never learned how to cope with those kinds of things and whatnot growing up. I found that things that I would not tolerate today, I totally tolerated them because that was all that I knew. Um, Including where I found myself after my second child had been born. I had her when I was 23, including finding my way to my DOC, which was crack. Um, how I found my way to that is a friend of mine. I was trying to help her, as I feel like I have always had a servant heart, because I didn't want somebody else to go through anything similar as to what I went through. And so I tried helping her, even though I didn't understand what the drug was or what the drug did. I didn't know, its composition, nothing. I still wanted to help. And I had gotten her an apartment where me and my daughters lived. And she and her children were there, got her out of the neighborhood she was in. She started working. She was doing really well. And she happened to need a ride to go get her check cashed. So I went to take her to go get her check cashed. And then she said that her children wanted to go see her ex, which did live in a very bad neighborhood, the neighborhood I had gotten her out of. And I was like, okay, only for 15 minutes. And she was really in there for less than 15 minutes with two kids. They come back out, get in the car. We all go back over to the apartment complex where we both lived. Her two and my two, they go outside, they're playing. She comes to me and she was like, look, I got this while I was there. I'm going to go ahead and take my kids and go over there to my apartment so I can do it. There was no talking her out of it. And me and the guy I was with, we had been doing a lot of arguing and whatnot. He wasn't there. So, I was like, okay, look, I'd rather you do it here than do it there. And that way I could just keep an eye on your kids and my kids and know that everything is okay. So she did what she needed, what she did to get things set up. And I watched her do it. And I saw that release come over her. Knowing how I felt internally with how things were in my life, I looked out again to make sure that the four kids were okay, that they were safe, that they were playing, and they were. So then I asked to try it. And for me, it only took that one time and I was off and running. At first, it was just every couple of days, and then it was only on the weekend, and then it was every other day. Everything that you can possibly think of, that a female would do in order to obtain the drug, I did, including selling stuff, pawning stuff, as well as myself. I became really tight with a certain group of folks that are very dangerous, to the point that they were using me to kind of pimp out other women and a few times other men. They had also used me to place a hit out on someone. It was that horrible. It was that negative of a situation. That person never did get hurt. They are still alive and well. Thank God. But that's where I was in that life. I had my children at one point had gotten taken out of the home, and I had my third child in the middle of all this, and in between bouts of being getting clean and then relapsing, getting clean and then relapsing. But the kids have been taken out of the home several times, and one of the very last times, my son's father, and he was like, I need you to get yourself together. We got to find your rehab, period. Back then was when instead of the flat screen monitors, it was the old school CRT monitors. Just a hair above dial up was the internet speed. But I was steadfast almost every day looking for a treatment center to go to. I would email, I would call, leave voicemails, and there's this pop-up that kept coming up. The place looked lavish. There was zero way I was going to be able to afford it, zero way I was going to be able to get in there. I'd click off the pop-up and then keep searching. Later on, I would be sitting there, cut the computer on, bam, that pop-up was still there. And this happened repeatedly. And it, come to find out, that was the only place that would answer my email or my call, which was Pavillon. I went in at the end of 2003, finished at the beginning of 2004. I was one of the lucky recipients of a scholarship. The only insurance that I had was Medicaid, which was one of the biggest reasons that I thought I'd never get in. Enjoyed the program, loved the program. I still have my aftercare book. I have my notebook from while I was in there as well, or my binder from while I was in there as well. There's so much that I learned, but what I didn't realize is that I was not ready, because I was doing it for my children. I was doing it because of DSS. I was doing it because of court. I wasn't doing it because of me. And if I was doing it because of me, I was on the back burner. I was the last reason for having done it. So it didn't stick, not right away. The seeds were planted, but it didn't stick. At my 30-day mark, me and another young lady that, or 28, 30-day mark, me and another young lady that had went through the program had went to watch the second group of 04 graduate, and she and I left from there and we went and used. Still though, only, it took, that was in 2004. I had again, went through periods of being clean and then relapsing, being clean and then relapsing. 2005, there was a really big relapse, to the point that my son's father decided he was going to take him, and so he did. He took him out to California, where he was from. And I ended up going through some red tape to try to get him back. And I did get him back for a short amount of time. I was still clean. I had not relapsed, but there was some miscommunication between myself and someone else at a counseling center, where when I spoke about a using dream, they misunderstood and ended up calling DSS, and he was removed from my home because they thought that I had actually used, not that it was a dream. And that was in the summer of 05. Around December of 05, I'll lose custody of him to where he's no longer in foster care. His dad has gotten full custody. It's just not permanent. They're going to give us one more court date. And the last time I saw him was December the 23rd of that year. December the 30th of that year, my best friend was murdered. She was murdered and left behind by her assailant for her daughter, and because she was watching my daughters as well, to find her there deceased. She after that had happened, I gave up. I had my daughter staying with my mother in Eastern North Carolina. I was out here in Western North Carolina. I had lost my son. I had lost my best friend. I felt like I didn't have a whole lot of reasoning to even try. So at that point, I absolutely threw in the towel and I ran hard, harder than I was before I had came to Pavilion. It wasn't until November of 2006 did I get really tired. And that was, I really do think, because I had graduated from crack cocaine to crystal meth, and it was taking me down an even, the beginning parts of an even darker road. And I remember the night of the 14th, November 14th, that was the last night I was using. I decided then I was getting rid of everything. So everything that got crushed, it got flushed, it got thrown away. I cleaned the house like there was no tomorrow. And so my first day of being clean was November 15th of 2006, and that is my date. Now there was a lot of bad things that happened prior to my ever using, a lot of bad things. And those things kind of were my reasoning or excuse once I did find drugs to stay out. What I didn't realize is that none of that really held a candle as to what I was going to experience while I was in recovery. The first thing that I experienced was at my 30-day mark. December the 14th, 2006 was the day that my youngest sister, who was 24 at the time, was listed as a missing person. She is still missing. She has 4 children. And that was at my 30-day mark. Around my 9-month mark, again, by the grace of God, I encountered a woman that ran, she was a counselor. She did IOP meetings. Everyone that was around me that was clean were relapsing left and right. It was like they were all domino effect. Every one of them were falling, and I did not want to. I was done. I was not wanting to run that risk. And so I went and sat in that counseling office. And once she and I had a verbal interaction, she had invited me to her IOP group. And that was where I ended up planting my butt. And there was a lot of work. She was not one that would allow you to just sit there. You had to do the work. And I'm grateful for her. I'm grateful for that, because if it wasn't for her being right there at the right time in that moment, the seeds that were planted while I was at Pavilion would not have been watered. Or the the soil having been tilled. I ended up let's see, that was around my 9-month mark. There's been other folks in my life, family members and friends, that have overdosed on all kinds of drugs. An uncle that committed suicide. And I myself am one who has had a large struggle with suicidal ideation. And my uncle was one that actually did it. My grandmother, who was my rock, I ended up losing her to natural causes. My godson, I was the last family member that he saw alive. He had OD'd. He was huffing and decided to be, he was part of a homeless community. He chose to be homeless rather than to be helped, and was huffing, laid back, and never woke up. The 2 people that he was with wrapped him up and put him in a drainage pipe, and he was found probably about a year later, only the lower part of his body was left. And I had to go through, I had his baby teeth. His mom had his baby teeth. I had a lock of his hair. And between the both, they were sent off and found out that the DNA matched, and that it was him. Even about a year ago, they found his skull. The two individuals that were with him, they both are still at large. They're both still walking around, and the police know who they are, but they're still walking around. That there was a very difficult situation to handle. And then I've had somebody message me wanting to talk to me about my sister. So I had the conversation with them, and it was very bad, to where it was one of my first mental confirmations that she may not be here any longer. The person even went on record, and still they haven't been able to pinpoint anything down. So it's still no closure. We still look at it as she's missing, because if we look at it as she's no longer here, then the guilt and whatnot sets in and we gave up. If we, it's a constant battle, a constant limbo. But that report was one that just set my mind reeling. And then there was another person that had been missing from Eastern North Carolina that they found deceased, and that just kept my mind reeling. Then the anniversary of her missing popped up, my mind reeling. The anniversary of losing custody of my son, my stepbrother dying, also in December, reeling. My best friend that was murdered, my mind reeling. By the time that around January, the end of December, beginning of January of 1920, I begged for someone to go get me some drugs. I was that close, tossing in the towel. I picked up the phone, which weighed a ton, and began typing, began calling. With one of them, she is my sponsor now. Because it took a culmination of so many things, and because of how I felt inward, the learned behavior of having zero processing skills and zero coping skills reared its head. And every tool that I had, they seemed so far away at that moment. The only tool that I had left was to reach out to the community that I had found my way into. Even though I had distanced myself from them, I still found my way back. And grabbed on with everything that I had. And I did not relapse. I did not use. January of 2020, my oldest daughter, she's pregnant with her second child, and we find out what the baby is going to be. And the baby is a boy, but we also find out that the left side of the baby's heart didn't develop, so he has HLHS. And that automatically means a minimum of 3 heart surgeries in order for him to survive. The mortality rate is still pretty high with that. Prior to 1986, almost every child that was born with their heart not developing, it was called blue baby syndrome, every one of them passed away. 1986 was when the doctors had come out with 3 different surgeries, and that began saving these children's lives. That began to be our life, our process. learning what to look for, how to deal with it, trying to be, strong for my daughter and her fiance and their oldest son, through it all. That was our new plan. That was our new life. And then in March, the sister that's missing, like I said, she has 4 children. Her youngest daughter died in a car accident on impact. The gentleman that was driving, her boyfriend, he left her there. We don't know if she died alone or not, but he left her there, and she was found lifeless and whatnot. And when her casket closed at her funeral, I didn't just see my niece laying there at 19, but I saw my niece laying there with my sister. And this was another thing that almost carried me out. But I had to be strong for my daughter. I had to be strong for her family. So kept pushing, kept moving forward, began talking some more about what was going on with my niece, what was going on with the baby. And the baby comes in May of last year. And he's doing great. He is absolutely beautiful, doing phenomenal. Beating and meeting every milestone that they had given him, and doing phenomenal. He was supposed to have had his first open heart surgery at 7 a.m. on the morning of May 27th. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a turn that they couldn't bring him back from, and we lost him later on that day. I had her oldest son with me, who was excited and couldn't wait to meet his brother, and had to drive him from the hotel to the hospital because of COVID. Not a lot of folks couldn't be there. They had not been able to meet. So on the way there, I'm breaking down mentally, but I'm having to try to be positive and be strong and not let him see that Gigi, that's what he calls me, is upset. And because he's sitting there in the back seat and he's looking out the window and he's talking about his brother and how much he can't wait for his brother to get bigger so they can play and whatnot. And I'm driving him to meet his brother and lose his brother at the same time. Get him there to the hospital, and we go into the room. He gets to meet and hold his brother, and the look on his face, it was a very proud moment. But then you could see when he started to realize what was happening. And, I got to watch that day, a part of him never come back out of that room. And I got to watch my daughter never come, a big part of her never come back out of that room either. But instead of that taking me out, that made me choose to dig in deeper, because I was granted the gift of getting into recovery and all of the gifts that I had been given along the way of overcoming different things to stay in recovery, to be able to be there and be present at the worst moment of their life. Every single thing that has happened to me since being in recovery was a reason or an excuse to go back out. Every single thing that happened in a positive light was a reason, a excuse for Joyce to find more of Joyce to stay in. Because I stayed in, I was able to overcome all those things. Because I stayed in, I was able to be there for my daughter. Because I stayed in, I was able to be there when her daughter was born just 3 weeks ago yesterday, to hold her, to love her, to walk with them through everything that they've gone through. Has it been easy? No. Has it been worth it? Yes. Once I was ready to give it up, and not because DSS said to, not because my children needed me to, not because the court system said that I had to, but because I was ready. Once I was ready, the desire to stay clean became most important. But because I took my hands off for a little while, because I didn't work my program for a period of time, I almost went back when things began to take me under the quicksand of life, where one thing piles on another, piles on another, piles on another, until you're up to your neck and you can't breathe and you can't figure out any other way. You can't get out, like you're in quicksand. But because I chose to reach out to begin reworking my program, I'm here. And I will be here November 15th, 15 years. My biggest piece of advice is, no matter what comes your way, and life will throw a lot at you, is keep pushing. You're worth it. The trial or tribulation or struggle that you're going through is going to be temporary. It will end. You just have to do your part and keep pushing through it. Don't give up, don't succumb, and try your best to not take your hands off of your recovery. Because when you do, as with almost everything in life, just as you're about to acclimate or grow to the next level of where your higher power or where God wants you to be, something is going to happen to try to trip you up. Same thing with recovery. If you take your hands off of your recovery program, something is going to happen to try to trip you up just when you're about to break through to the next level. Keep pushing, keep praying, keep moving one foot in front of the other, no matter what. If you do that, you will see on the other side, and you will see that in recovery. That's all that I have. Thank you for letting me share.